Clause 9, Section C of the Intergalactic Matrimonial Code clearly states that a spouse cannot be incinerated while the other is filing a grievance regarding the temperature of the hors d'oeuvres. Jackson screamed, ducking as a plasma bolt singed the top of his synthetic foam hat. He looked ridiculous, dressed as a celestial tuber farmer, complete with a fake beard that smelled vaguely of burnt hair. He was currently the only thing standing between a squad of armored shock troopers and the woman frantically hot-wiring a broadcast console behind him. "Are you improvising legal statutes?" Kalia hissed, her bioluminescent skin pulsing a frantic, iridescent blue. "I'm buying you time," Jackson yelled back, throwing a handful of dried tubers at the guards. True love is finding someone who will distract armed guards while you hack the government. Just hurry up. It turned out the road to accidental heroism began exactly 6 hours earlier, with a beverage that tasted like battery acid in despair. Jackson Cole leaned against a rusted support beam on Station Omega-4, grimacing as he swallowed the last of the station's coffee. He was greasy, tired, and smelled of engine coolant. He was a mechanic who fixed things that shouldn't be broken for people who couldn't afford to pay him. The plan for the day was simple: locate a subcondenser for a freighter, eat something that wasn't gray, and sleep. Then the crowd parted. She walked through the station's promenade like a star collapsing into a gravity well, undeniable and terrifyingly bright. Kaelia was Silvaris, which meant she was tall, elegant, and literally glowing. Her skin shimmered with soft violet light, marking her as high nobility. Jackson watched, mostly because everyone was watching, but also because he'd never seen anyone look so regal while aggressively scanning a crowd of dock workers. Her eyes locked onto him. She didn't blink. She pointed a finger that probably cost more to insure than his entire ship. "That one," she declared, her voice ringing with terrifying authority. "That is my husband." Jackson choked on his battery acid. "I'm sorry. The what now?" Before he could form a coherent denial, a shadow eclipsed the artificial sun of the promenade. Brog, a bodyguard the size of a small shuttlecraft, stepped forward. He didn't speak. He simply shoved a glowing blue holographic writ into Jackson's grease-stained hands. The text scrolled rapidly. But the words irrevocable union and penalty for refusal, spousal forfeiture, death, stood out in bold red letters. "Congratulations," Brog grunted, his voice sounding like gravel in a blender. "You are now legally bound." Jackson looked at the woman, then at the mountain of muscle, then back at the woman. "Lady, I don't even know your name, and I definitely didn't propose." "You did," Kalia said, stepping into his personal space. She smelled like ozone and expensive perfume. She grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "And if anyone asks, our song is the hum of a hyperdrive engine. Now walk, or we both die." 15 minutes later, they were huddled in a booth at the Neon Noodle, a dive bar where the floor was sticky enough to steal your boots. "A coup," Jackson repeated, staring at her. "Huh, you married me to stop a political coup." "A claimed spouse grants temporary diplomatic immunity for exactly 6 hours, Kalia explained, tapping furiously on a datapad. "My uncle wants the throne. He cannot assassinate a married woman without triggering a trade war with whatever sector you hail from." "Earth," Jackson said, "and we don't have trade wars. We mostly just argue on the internet." "Perfect. You are exotic and litigious. It fits." She didn't look at him, but her light was dimming, flickering with anxiety. She needed a human shield. She got a husband. Please try not to get shot. The paperwork is tedious. 6 hours of fake marriage, Jackson muttered, rubbing his face. A lifetime of diplomatic consequences. Only if we survive, she corrected. A sharp beep emitted from her wrist. Kalia froze. Her eyes went wide, the violet glow flaring white. That's a tracking beacon, she whispered. Yours? No, the assassin's. A small, hovering robot, designed to sell roasted nuts, drifted too close to their table. It wasn't selling nuts. It was vibrating. Jackson didn't think. He didn't calculate the odds. He just moved. He tackled the glowing alien aristocrat, dragging her down beneath a heavy synth-wood table, just as the snack bot turned into a fireball. The explosion blew out the front windows and rained burning noodles everywhere. Jackson's ears rang. He coughed, waving away smoke, and found Kalia staring up at him, her shimmer erratic and wild. My immunity, she gasped. Expired early? Jackson guessed, helping her up. Ignored, she corrected, grabbing his hand. They aren't following the rules. Great, Jackson said. We're spotting laser sights cutting through the smoke. Then neither are we. He kicked a ventilation grate loose from the wall. Ladies first, wife. The ventilation shafts of Station Omega-4 were a culinary tour of disappointment, smelling consecutively of burnt garlic, engine grease, and damp socks. By the time Jackson and Kalia kicked out the grate near the Central Comms tower, they looked less like a diplomatic power couple and more like something the station's sanitation droids would refuse to sweep up. We need cover, Kalia whispered, pulling a strand of cobweb from her glowing eyelashes. We need a miracle, Jackson corrected. He stared at the contents of a crate labeled Zog's Interstellar Theater Troupe, props and sundries. Or we need to commit to the bit, which brought them back to the present. Jackson, dressed as a celestial tuber farmer in synthetic burlap, shouting at heavily armed shock troopers, while Kalia, draped in a moss pilgrim robe that shed green fuzz with every movement, wiretapped the main console. Spousal forfeiture is a Class A felony, Jackson roared, brandishing a prop hoe made of painted foam. I demand a tribunal. I demand a lawyer. I demand you stop shooting at my wife before I file a noise complaint. The lead guard hesitated. It was the human factor. Most species would have surrendered or fired by now. Only a human would stand in the open, wearing a fake beard, threatening a heavily armored squadron with litigation and gardening tools. The sheer absurdity bought them 3 vital seconds. Got it, Kalia said, her voice dropping an octave. She slammed her hand onto the console. Wekra, the massive holographic screens lining the tower, usually reserved for propaganda and weather reports, flickered violently. The image of the shock trooper's commander froze, distorted by static. Then music started. A bouncy, terrifyingly cheerful accordion tune filled the room. What is that? The lead guard shouted, lowering his rifle in confusion. That, Kalia said, a smudge of dirt on her cheek glowing soft pink with satisfaction, is the priority override channel. On every screen in the sector, the terrifying visage of Safety Sam the Serpent, a purple puppet with googly eyes, appeared. But instead of teaching children about airlock safety, Sam was projecting a scrolling feed of encrypted bank transfers, assassination orders, and a video of Kalia's uncle admitting he thought the Silvaris people were gullible glow sticks. The silence in the room was heavier than the gravity plating. That's the general, one of the guards muttered, looking at the puppet, then at his commander. And that, Jackson said, pointing the foam hoe at the screen, is why you don't skip the terms and service agreements. The guards looked at each other, then with a collective shrug that transcended species barriers, they lowered their weapons. They weren't paid enough to fight a tuber farmer backed by a whistleblowing puppet. An hour later, the adrenaline had drained away, leaving only the hum of the station's environmental scrubbers and the quiet ache of bruised ribs. They stood on the observation deck. In watching the station's security drones escort Kalia's uncle's ship into a holding pattern, the coup was over. The diplomatic immunity had expired, along with the fake marriage contract. Jackson leaned against the railing, peeling off the fake beard. It took a layer of skin with it. Ouch! Okay, so, mission accomplished. Kalia didn't look at the ships. She was looking at him. Her bioluminescence had settled into a warm, steady gold, a color Jackson hadn't seen before. It felt like standing in late afternoon sunlight. "The writ is dissolved," she said softly. "You are free to go, Jackson Cole. No more death threats. No more snack bots." "Right," Jackson said. He looked down at his hands. They were still shaking, just a little. "Back to fixing condensers. Back to the battery acid coffee. Is that what you want?" He looked up. The space between them felt charged, electric, heavier than the moment the laser bolt singed his hat. She wasn't glowing like a noble anymore. She was just glowing like a woman who didn't want to be alone. "Truth is," Jackson said, scratching the back of his neck, "I never really liked fixing condensers, and I'm pretty sure I'm technically still a prince of Tuberland, legally speaking." Kalia smiled. It wasn't the polite, courtly smile she'd worn at the promenade. It was real. "I believe the title is Duke of Yams, actually." "Duke works," Jackson said, stepping closer. "Does the Duke get to buy the lady a drink? A real one this time?" Kalia reached out, her fingers brushing the soot from his jacket. "I think the lady would prefer that to a state dinner." 3 years later, the camera drone zoomed in. "And remember," Jackson said, while looking directly into the lens while skillfully flipping a pan of sizzling electric blue vegetables, "if it doesn't smell like ozone, you didn't sear it high enough." The studio audience on the Silveris homeworld erupted in applause. Cooking with the Consort was the highest-rated midday program in the sector. Jackson wiped his hands on a silk apron, flashing a grin that was only slightly less greasy than his mechanic days. Off stage in the wings, Kalia watched him. She held a data pad in one hand and a real coffee, imported from Earth at great expense, in the other. She took a sip, the steam curling around her face. Her skin pulsed with a contented, soft rhythm. It turned out the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their unpredictability or their litigious nature. It was their cooking. But as Jackson laughed at his own joke and the crowd cheered, Kalia decided she was perfectly fine with the risk. Accidental destiny indeed.